This is the website for The Liquidator, which is the former website of Abracadata, who were a major software company in the 80s and 90s, mostly for Mac and mostly for CAD software. And it looks as if they're actually alive and well, because you can see they're producing new material all the time. Design Your Own Home is one of their definitive programs, and now they have Mac Draft as well. And they do a lot of railway games too. 3D Railroad Master is essentially a model train CAD program, which you buy alongside of 3D Railroad Concept and Design. Easy Architect is another new CAD program. And you can see they've updated this very recently, as recently as March 10th, so they're clearly still in business, in spite of their own declaration of defeat. And it's attractive software. I've always liked it. The train software, actually, here I'm showing you, the history websites don't have very much information. You can tell they go back to 1987, but it's very hard getting history information about them. But they were important for Mac users, certainly, back in the day, because Macs, their main disadvantage in the old days was lack of software. So anybody who was producing CAD software and stuff that's nice was an asset. And the train programs were great too. If you were a rail fan, they were one of the only games in town, although they didn't generally build simulators. They generally built train games. So Design Your Own Railroad was a CAD simulator. Well, it was a CAD program for model trains. Train Engineer was a train engineer game, basically. Train Engineer Deluxe is the latest version, but it's for Mac Classic primarily. It's not very useful for modern computers. 3D Railroad Master is better. Sprout is strangely a plant simulator, which was long before its time. And they make stuff for Windows also. But their classic game, one of their classic games anyway, was the original Train Engineer. I'm going to play through that in a minute. But I'm still admiring their stuff here. You can see Design Your Own Railroad there, even though they don't make it anymore or support it anymore. In the little, I don't know what you'd call it, collage there. And then they have Game Studio, which was also ahead of its time, in that it was a number of years before Unity, and it was a very Unity-like program, actually. I actually have it, and I've never used it, which I really regret, actually. Basically, I got it, and I didn't have a powerful enough computer, and I never got around to actually using it. And now I have Unity, so I have to ask myself whether it's even a good idea to mess with it anymore. One of the only alternatives to Game Studio at the time was Coldstone by Beanox and Ambrosia, but it was a flop, unfortunately, and only supported 2D. Pillars of Garandal was developed on it, but that was about it. Now here's the original Train Engineer, which Abracadata released as freeware a few years after they released Train Engineer Deluxe. And the trains in this, in the QuickTime movies, or former QuickTime movies, are Lionel trains, not the real thing. In Train Engineer Deluxe, they use HO models, which is, I don't know, only for the crash scenes, and it's totally ridiculous. This, at least, you know, you can have a little bit more suspension of disbelief. Now, the track layouts that come with it are very complex, can take a long time to complete, and usually you can't complete them before your 24-minute, or in the game, 24-hour limit is up. So I'm going to build a basic track layout with the track editor to drive on. So you could call this a tutorial, except this editor is so easy to use, it doesn't really need a tutorial. Very, very easy. I built tons and tons of track layouts for this program too over the years. I'm building a new one here just because I want something easy to use for a playthrough. And it is a game, it's not a simulator, but it's one of my favorite games. It's always been one of my favorite games. It came out in 1994. It always came with the editor. The editor was never extra. It's all Steam, although the models in it are all Lionel. And basically the plot is what you'd think it would be, is you drive around delivering freight. And you can deliver passengers too, because if you're making the schedule, you can just say passengers, and then you're all set. It also supports different kinds of weather, different times of day, and so on. And it looks a little bit old, but it's a game, as I said. It's not really a simulator. Here are some of the scenery objects. And those are the industries you can add. I'm going to add a couple of mines here, or what I like to call mines. None of these force you to use them as anything in particular. You can just make up what they are, which is, I guess, a good thing. So I put in 2 mines, and these mines will feed a steel mill. And the way this is going to work is the steel mill will then feed an auto plant, and the auto plant will feed an auto wholesaler, which makes sense, right? That's how a real supply chain works. Although in reality, in real life, you would also have a tire plant and a parts plant, because car parts and the assembly of cars are usually conducted in 2 separate locations. And indeed, the railroads make a lot of money off this. It's a little bit ironic because people think of the auto industry and the rail industry as enemies. But when it comes to the manufacturing process of automobiles, they're a boon to the railroads, actually. And always have been. Because it's a very heavy industrial operation with huge volumes. And so it just makes sense to use rail transport. So whatever the rivalry in terms of passenger transport, the railroads and the automakers get along just fine when it comes to the railroads making money off supporting the auto industry. And it's some of the most lucrative traffic, which is, I guess, what you'd expect. It's an expensive product, right? And a lot of just-in-time deliveries, like for the auto parts and so on, because the supply chain has to be very efficient and very reliable. But here, I'm only going to do the steel, just to keep it simple. So I'm going to put the auto plant in here. This is a bit time-consuming to build these layouts, but I figured it's better to have a good test layout for the playthrough than struggle with one of the very complex ones that the game comes with. Just about all the track layouts are for basically urban industrial railroading too. You're limited in your layout board size, and as a result, you can't do great line haul stuff with this game, especially since you also don't have signals, and it's not really a simulator anyway. It doesn't have realistic train physics or anything like that. Nor does it have a proper cab view, although it is first person. You do get to see out the front of your train, but no cab controls or anything like that. It's all just menus that you click on. You'll see that later. So this track is almost done. I'm going to have to switch to the next video shortly because I'm running out of time on this one. Okay, next video.